Congrats on making it to the 8th of these videos. We've got one more left to go in this particular module. This video is all about the word atonement, which has really, really significant implications for the Christian worldview. And it essentially has multiple meanings as well, as we'll see in just a moment. So first, though, just by way of reminder or by way of review, there's this idea that there's this drama going over this idea of God's shalom project. So God creates, but then there's a crisis because humanity falls into sin. There's this idea of redemption emerging through God's kingdom, and then finally, in the work of Jesus, and then finally, shalom is restored in the coronation, this 4-act drama that's playing out through the entire Bible. And just again, as a way of review, God is omnibenevolent. He's always good. The world was created good and created for humans to flourish, but humans who were made in the image of God chose sin. And again, that definition of vandalism of shalom. So the humans were created in shalom, but then there was this vandalism that happened. And so atonement is really God's offer of redemption. And where are we from at this point? Human sin brought about this kind of distorted relationship with God. So the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus brought about the restoration of that relationship. And so how did Jesus do that? In other words, how does Jesus' death and resurrection, what does that do for us? There have been multiple theories, and there are multiple slides in the handout that you have. And so I've just picked out the last slide. That's why the final items are bolded, but that doesn't mean they're more important than the others. So just to highlight these different theories that theologians have had over time of how Jesus' work on the cross, what does that mean? So in one sense, there's this idea of ransom or rescue, that Jesus won the victory over evil, and that was from the 1st century, from Irenaeus. Then there was this idea in the 11th century. You can always imagine, Anselm, it'll help you remember, or as you fill out the worksheet, you think about the kings and queens and the knights in the court. There was all about honor. And so in this sense, it was this satisfaction theory was that Jesus was bringing back God's honor. Like we had dishonored him by our sin, humanity, and therefore Jesus' work was to bring back God's honor. John Calvin in the 16th century had this idea of substitution, and he had much more of a judicial kind of a way of thinking about it. And this would be one where Jesus bore our punishment, or Jesus paid the penalty for our sin. And that would be the one if you've heard any atonement theory, that's probably the one that you've heard. It's most common today. And it comes from sort of this courtroom idea that, there's a penalty and the person can't pay. Jesus steps in and makes the payment for us. And then the final one is the moral influence by Abelard in the 11th century. This idea that Jesus displays God's love. God's love is on full display when Jesus is on the cross. If we ever had a doubt that God loved humanity, all we have to do is look at the cross and we say, wow, God really loves people. And so all of these theories have different strengths and weaknesses. These are ways that people have interpreted the work of Jesus throughout history. And really, as we look at the scripture, all of these are laid out in the New Testament. And so they're all available. And as we'll see, it helps us to understand. So if someone is feeling alienated from God, then the idea of Jesus' reconciliation is a significant one. If people are feeling condemned, then this idea of justification is important. If people are feeling enslaved, then the idea of redemption is important. If people are just at the mercy of their sin, then the idea of empowerment of Jesus substituting himself and taking that sin is so powerful to us. It's important for us to recognize that as we think about atonement, we tend to think about it only in the way that makes sense to us, but there are multiple ways. Similarly, in a kind of more practical way, if people are feeling alienated and cut off, then Jesus can reconcile and restore. If people are feeling the weight of guilt or shame, Jesus makes you right. He justifies you before God. If you're trapped or enslaved by habits, Jesus can redeem you, rescue you, like the Exodus, save you out of that. And if you're feeling like, I'm dead inside, is there more to life? Is this all there is? Jesus' power gives life and purpose. So there's a number of ways that the atonement impacts who we are and how we can live our lives today. We've got one more video to talk about, which is the final part of presenting a Christian worldview, and that is the idea of the afterlife.